Yeah, so I'm definitely late to this movie. Mission Impossible 7 came out a whole ass week ago. For normal people, that would be like fine. But for me, I do like to usually see movies as soon as they come out. There was a problem here though. I just wasn't done catching up. I hadn't even watched, like, any of these movies. And then I just decided, you know what, I think it could be fun. Everyone started talking about how great Mission Impossible was, and I was like, really? It is that good? Okay, I'll check it out, I guess. And I started out, and the first, like, 4 movies were all decent to good. And by the time that I watched the third one, the new movie was already out, so I was thinking, you know what, I'll just go see it. Long story short, that didn't work out. I ended up not being able to see the movie because I went to the wrong theater, which is kind of funny, but, you know, whatever. And I'm actually happy because that gave me time to watch 4, 5, and 6, and while 4 wasn't anything amazing, 5 and 6, Rogue Nation and Fallout, are both really great movies that actually really did get me into the franchise and get me much more hyped for the new one. This movie is directed by Christopher McQuarrie, who also directed and wrote Rogue Nation and Fallout, the 2 best movies, and he also worked as a writer on Top Gun Maverick, last year's Legacy sequel featuring Tom Cruise in an action role that was great. It was amazing. And so, understandably, my hopes were very high going into this movie, and you know what, it delivered. It was pretty great. I'll start with non-spoilers, and I'm just gonna say, if you want more of the same, if you want more of these crazy stunts and action, you absolutely get that. Tom Cruise is 61, and he's moving like a man who very much didn't break his ankle filming the last movie. Like, it's crazy that he's still doing all of his own stunts, considering they are life-threatening. I mean, I think a lot of people know about the motorcycle jump off a cliff stunt, which happens in this movie, and was released like a couple weeks before, all the footage of doing it and setting it up. And they did say in that video that if it didn't go well, it was serious injury or death. Tom Cruise really earns that title of like the last action movie star left that everyone's calling him. He's absolutely that guy. He's the face of action movies. He is still doing a motorcycle jump off of a cliff at 61. And they said, and I believe them here, I mean, maybe they could just be making it up to get hype up, but like they said that Mission Impossible 8 is crazier. And I believe them. I am so excited, and I am also a little scared for Tom Cruise because he's absolutely never going to back out of any of these, and they're going to get increasingly more terrifying. Aside from that, there's the action side of things. It is an action movie, and I mean, it's great. The action has always been great in this series. In the last movie, you got that cliffside fight as the climax, and that was amazing. And in this movie, they really go for it with some actual, like, cartoonish fights. Pom Klementieff has a ridiculously aggressive fighting style in this movie that makes every fight scene, including her, really fun. They managed to make the fighting styles in this movie just full of character. There's also a car chase scene in this movie that has some of the funniest bits I've seen in, like, the entire franchise. I don't really want to spoil any of the jokes in that car chase scene, but there's one involving Ethan and Grace that's, like, a little bit surreal, honestly, and I thought it was amazing. Before I get into spoilers, I do want to mention one negative, that is the story. The story overall is not really a complete negative, but some parts of the story didn't really work for me. If you look back at the last 2 movies, Rogue Nation and Fallout, I'd say that Fallout is a little bit better than Rogue Nation, as well as a little bit better than this movie, and that's because it has the most clean-cut and, like, sensible story of the 3. Everything in that movie feels like it follows a very specific sequence of events that totally makes sense to me. I'd say it has the least conveniences and contrivances and all those words, while both Rogue Nation and Dead Reckoning have a little bit more of those conveniences and contrivances that kind of feel like they're there to get to the next scene, or there was just like a part of this movie that they really wanted to put in, and they kind of got to it through some weird moments. Even the timing of certain moments and sequences feel like they could have been adjusted a little bit just to make it a little better. Sure, it's Mission Impossible, where not everything has to make sense, but just they proved that they could do it in Fallout. They did it almost flawlessly in Fallout, And so I think that since they did it so well there, they proved that they could do it again. And it would be great to see them do it again. You know, not a huge problem. It still worked for me. The story still worked for me overall. But there were moments that just brought it down a little. So with those out of the way, I'm going to get into spoilers. I'll give you the usual spoiler warning. 3, 2, 1. And if you haven't seen the movie, you should be gone by now. Okay, so I'm just going to skip like all the way to the end. The climax of this movie is so exhilarating. Mission Impossible is so good at over-the-top action set pieces. In the last movie, we had 2 helicopters ramming into each other, and in this movie, we have the 2 main characters climbing through train cars as each one that they get through falls behind them into a ravine. Come on, that's so cool. That activates my monkey brain. I really wanted to see a lot of dumb shit in this movie, and I got so much, it was perfect. Also, Haley Atwell's character, who is one of these 2 characters jumping through train cars, was a normal person at the beginning of this movie. You know, a thief, but a normal person. And I think they did a really good job of evolving her character naturally. In that club scene, with that hilarious reveal that the party is the entity, you actually get Haley Atwell's character running away from a fight that she puts up a decent fight in, but then she just leaves because, you know, she's a normal person at that point in the movie. And by the end of the movie, she's able to save a train full of passengers while evading cops and villains the entire movie. It's really fantastic build-up to the idea that by the end of the movie, she's an IMF agent, because, you know, she becomes an IMF agent and goes through training during this movie. Sure, she might not be as technically skilled as Luther or as good at fighting as Ethan. No one is, but, you know. But she gets much better over the course of this movie. From the beginning to the end, she gets much better, and I think it's a great arc. So we have one great character there. One of the weaker characters, I'd actually say, is the villain, Gabriel. That's not to say he's bad. He's just not really as important as you would expect. From what I can tell, he's going to be much more important in this second movie, and we're going to learn a lot more about him. In this movie, we learn that he's a man from Ethan's past who probably mentored him at some point and must have, like, killed someone close to him. We see a scene over and over again from Ethan's past, and overall, we just don't really learn anything more. This is definitely a J.J. Abrams mystery box that's meant to be opened in the second movie, so that's fine. It's just that in this movie, I didn't love him. I thought he was good. He wasn't anything special. However, it is interesting to consider him against the other villain, AI. You know, the terrifying concept of AI. And, I mean, it sounds goofy, but it does work in the movie. And with how powerful and terrifying they portray AI to be, it does make you wonder, you know, who's the real villain? Because the series has never really had 2 villains who are just as powerful as each other. One of them is always the other's subordinate. And it really feels like Gabriel is going to get betrayed by his AI at some point. I don't think it's going to work out for him. That's just a prediction, but I think it would make a lot of sense. The AI definitely does not care about this guy. And the idea of humans thinking they have control plays into him just as much as it plays into everyone else in the movie. Anyways, let's finally talk about Ethan and all of our friends from the last movies. Ethan is great in this movie, and the description of this movie, if you search it up on Google, definitely tells you that, you know, somebody is going to be in danger this movie, and Ethan isn't going to be able to save them. And that does happen, we'll get to it in a bit. But first of all, I do want to just talk about how likable Ethan is in this movie, and over the series, he is very likable. He has his moments in, like, Mission Impossible 2, where he's kind of just dressed like a fuckboy and seems like a really over-the-top action hero. But he really does care so much about his friends, and he even cares much more about strangers than himself. He basically says that in the movie, and again, I believe him too. Ethan cares so much for the people around him and is willing to put his life on the line. They just really make him likable in this movie. And it also makes him believable in his idea that he will destroy the AI instead of, you know, realizing the raw power like all the people think he's going to. I think what this movie does best for Ethan is really portray him as a hero. He is a hero. With the rest of the cast, you have, like, Luther, who really doesn't have that much going on in this movie. He's just fun. Ving Rhames is incredible as Luther in every single movie. He appears in the 4th movie for, like, 30 seconds, and he's great. Everyone loves Luther. Whatever amount of screen time Luther gets in a Mission Impossible movie is going to be one of the best parts. You also have Ilsa, who dies in this movie. Elsa dies in this movie, and I think it makes sense. If I were to pick one of the returning characters to get killed off, it would probably be her. They kind of perfectly lay it out at the beginning of the movie when everyone thinks she's dead, but she's actually not, where they say that, yeah, Ethan has been getting her out of these situations all this time, over and over again, and she's finally died. And basically the idea is that she died on her own accord. She died saving someone to really show that she was a hero all along when she was the most morally gray of the four characters that are throughout the whole series, most of the series. I think it was the right choice. I think they did a good job with it, and, I'm sad about it and all, but at least Rebecca Ferguson gets to have full commitment to Dune now. And to round out the main cast, you have Simon Pegg as Benji, and oh my god, I am so scared for Benji in the next movie. Benji has, like, a death wish, a death badge, like, on his chest. He is so ready to get killed off in this movie. There's this scene with the bomb in the airport where it's pretty obvious that he's not going to die, because if he dies, then the whole ass airport blows up and everyone dies. But still, my brain wasn't fully working there, and I was like, oh my god, Benji's going to die. And it really just seems like the whole movie he's going to die. He leaves the safe house multiple times, and every time I'm like, oh my god, they're going to kill Benji. And then they have the nerve to, in the very last scene, when the AI is doing its monologue, cut to Benji, like, every single time that the AI is like, somebody is going to die. You can't save everyone. I am so scared. But honestly, this really worked for this movie. Having a character who really seems like they're gonna die the whole time absolutely heightened my nerves, and my nerves are gonna be even higher in the next movie because he didn't die. He's still here, and he still has the chance to die. Oh my god, I'm really scared. Okay, let me finish things up. I want to talk about how this movie works as a part 1. I actually think it's really good as a part 1. The movie is split down the middle, where in this movie, the key is the MacGuffin, the two keys that you put together, and then you can use them to open the thing in the submarine and get all the control of the AI. But only a couple people know where the submarine actually is, and so I'm guessing that in the second movie, it's going to be a race to the submarine. And that's a super exciting idea. Plus, at the end of this movie, you get a bunch of, like, alliances, a bunch of people switching teams. It's a really strong setup movie while also working very well as, like, a standalone, because you do have a whole story throughout this movie that's mostly tied up when Ethan shows that he has the key at the end. Despite some messy story beats and the villain not being completely developed, I mean, this movie just works really well, and I am even more hyped for the next movie than I was for this movie. It's great. Overall, I'd give this movie an 8 out of 10, a pretty strong 8 out of 10, and I'd say it's sitting right under Rogue Nation and right above Ghost Protocol as the third best Mission Impossible movie to date. I'll see you next year. Well, okay, I'll still be here. I just mean Mission Impossible. See you next year.